surfing technique and how exercise can support and open up opportunity for you to work on technique in the ocean. Remember, surfing is developed in the ocean or wave pools nowadays. Surf skate can really help too, but ultimately what counts is in the water, but we can do exercises to help support that. What we're gonna do, I'm all teched out here. Laptop, iPad, phone. We're gonna go through a turn, an average turn. I really tried. Don't hate too hard. This is an all right turn. It felt good. I posted this and somebody's like, what are some exercises we can do to do that? So again, the distinction. This is a technique. Exercise can support that technique. So let me zoom in a little, and trust me, we're not just gonna watch my average turn. We're gonna check out some Ethan Ewing as well. This is Hollow Trees last year. Decent little front side wrap, right? Cool, kind of smooth, nothing amazing, but an all right little turn. So we're gonna get into how some exercise can support that, how some techniques can support that, and how some prehab, rehab can support that as well. So let's keep diving in. Let's first go into, let's look at what a proper turn is. Ethan Ewing, flawless, boom. Like it's some of the best surfing on the planet as far as I'm concerned in terms of how it looks. So really good, beautiful frontside wrap. So first we need to understand the position because exercise is going to influence this position. Frontside turn, frontside wrap, most of surfing in general, it's what we call an asymmetrical stance. So squatting, barbell, goblet squat, squatting is what we call bilateral stance. Even distribution, equal shin angles, equal movement at the hip joint. Once we get into a lunge or a split squat position, we have asymmetrical forces going through the body, going through the knees, going through the hips, right? So surfing fundamentally is an asymmetrical stance with different loads going through the front leg versus the back leg and also going through the pelvis. From a technique perspective, one thing you can see is this pelvis is essentially going to wrap around. And it's wrapping around on top of femurs, your thigh bones, where there's different asymmetrical forces. So a lot of training we should do is, yes, legitimate bilateral stance squats, but we've got to get into a lunge stance, a split squat, this asymmetrical loading. Because what's happening again is that pelvis is turning along with the torso. So you've got different rotations going on at each hip joint and again, different pressures. So amazing turn. If we go back to my, don't hate, kind of average turn, it felt good. I tried. So again, you can see this kind of asymmetrical load. It's kind of a squat position. It's kind of a lunge. It's kind of this in between, but very different forces going through each hip joint in a different position. So what is an exercise we can immediately off the bat start working towards in order to support that technique in the water, right? Doing this exercise isn't going to make that technique happen. It's going to strengthen hip joints. It's going to give you more body awareness. It's going to enhance connective tissues around the knee, the pelvis, the low back. It's just a lateral lunge. So a lot of people starting out might just need to work on this lateral lunge. There's good mobility going through the outstretched leg adductors, especially adductor longus, even some pectineus, but we're also really starting to load hips and knees in kind of this asymmetrical pattern, but we're also bringing the torso over a leg. Again, if we go back to Ethan Ewing, what's happening here is this torso and pelvis is moving atop femurs, thigh bones, in different positions, different times, different forces. So in this position, you can see he started to shift that weight onto that front leg, essentially, and brought the torso on top of that hip. Yes, he's still pushing through his back foot. You'll see there's a really heavy, you can see the change of position in the board, really driving through that rear foot there, and then fully reinforces back onto that front leg. So this is a good starting point for a lot of people just because it's not a really difficult movement. This is kind of this entry point into this lateral lunge. What we want to get to is three-dimensional lunges. And so here I'm using a slider, really good drill. This is from the Bodyweight Surf Athlete program in the Surf Athlete app. And I'm hitting different vectors. So I reach out to the side. I then reach out backwards. I'm then gonna reach out further backwards. So you can see what's happening here. Let me figure out how to use coach's eye. Is we've got this pelvis, right? Femurs, and different loads as that pelvis is rotating around this fixed femur. You can see it reaching, elongating. We've got all sorts of different tensions going through this adductor group. Again, adductor longus, really important, adductor brevis, pectineus for pelvic stability. But we're also really strengthening this hip, predominantly glute medius minimus, as well as glute maximus. You're also getting some hamstrings. That helps stabilize the pelvis. So this is a really good drill for you to work towards or get to, where we're starting to impart forces that the body is subjected to in the water that helps support our ability to surf. This isn't gonna make you suddenly shred. All right, on to the next one. Another exercise. So if we again look at, amazing, Ethan Ewing, as he's going into this turn, this back arm, rear arm driver is starting to reach around. He's also starting to open up that lead arm. Reach around, don't get gnarly, don't get grimy. He's reaching through. We'll call it reaching through instead of reaching around. So as he's reaching around, it's changing the torso. It's starting to rotate that torso. That's happening through the anterior oblique sling. This external oblique on this side, this internal, why did that go black all of a sudden? I don't know. There we go. External to internal. It's creating this rotational force. Some of the spinal erectors, I believe iliocostalis, as well as some of the transversospinalis group muscles are helping to rotate as well, but largely this is driven through the oblique chain, the anterior oblique sling. And so as you can see, as he reaches through with that rear arm, it continues to rotate that torso. As he's rotating that torso via the obliques, it's starting to rotate the pelvis. You can see his pelvis. Look at the asymmetry here of that pelvis line. And asymmetry doesn't mean it's a bad thing. It's just, it's not 90 degrees, right? As he comes through, he's essentially thinking of, as he's reaching that rear arm through, the back side, his right hip is rotating through, similar to a golf swing. And so we've got that pelvis rotating around fixed femurs. Okay, the back leg's gonna move a little more than the front leg because he's gotta collapse into that knee, he's gotta drive. That lead leg is the support leg, the front leg. Imagine if he was like planting that front leg to then swing through and kick a soccer ball with the rear leg. So how can we incorporate the obliques, anterior oblique sling, with the pelvis, with the thighs, femurs, legs? We start working on chops. This is coming from the Surf Athlete 12-week program, uses a bit of exercise or resistance equipment. This is the entry point, right? Lateral lunge, we know how to do that. Fixed arms, not bent elbows, because we're not trying to train biceps here. We're just trying to rotate the torso via those obliques, and those obliques tie into the lead leg adductors. It's important. This is really big for hip stability, but pelvic control, also really good for low back health. This progresses into more of a dynamic chop where I'm rotating that entire pelvis around that lead leg. All right, so you can see how this starts to get really integrated. This exercise isn't gonna make you do some proper Ethan Ewing man turn all of a sudden, but it's preparing your tissues and nervous system for the loads and forces you're actually gonna feel in the surf. This is a really good drill. If you're a surfer out there, you got a cable machine or bands, you need to be doing this exercise. It feels good too. You can load this up, higher rep range or even lower rep range, hit some strength and hypertrophy. A last kind of exercise we can do just to start comfortably training through the obliques. This is a fixed upper body, moving lower body, so it's a little different than surfing, but it's still a novel way to train the obliques and to train the spine to be able to resist forces. This can actually be really helpful in kind of spinal rehab for people. Makes sense, right? Rotation, side to side. You're squeezing the ball together with the legs to kind of contract the adductors. That travels up into the deep core. You're getting some transverse abdominis. You're getting some multifidus control. This is doing a lot of positive things to the torso. So there's some exercise. We ready to go back to, let's get into a little rehabby, pre-habby stuff. Because if you're over the age of 35 and you're still surfing, you've got some aches and pains, no doubt. So we now see there's asymmetrical loads, right? There's different forces going through the back leg, going through the front leg. There's rotation of the pelvis. And as I start to collapse back down in, I load that front leg. You can see the back knee is collapsed, right? So we're getting that kind of valgus internal rotation. I've rotated the pelvis around the lead leg, so I'm actually getting internal rotation there as well. And you can see how that surf stance right here is, again, really asymmetrical. That's not a squat pattern. Really different forces and lines of tension going through the hips and pelvis. We can, again, check out Ethan Ewing. Instead of my average turn, we can look at a proper man turn, even though from it's like, what is he, 23 or something? Man turn, 23 years old. Yeah, I guess that works. So, again, kind of asymmetrical loads, different rotations. You can see he started to collapse that back leg. You see how that starts to look like a lateral lunge? It starts to look like a three-dimensional slider lunge. Now he's going to put that load back onto that lead leg, drop back in, that collapsed back knee. Boom. Right? So what's happening is we've got really different forces going through the pelvis, going through the sacrum. Let's open up an anatomy app for a minute. Let's nerd out. So, what happens often in humans, it's associated with back pain. It can come from injury. It comes from asymmetrical loading like surfing or skateboarding or even golf, even fighters, soccer players a lot. We can develop what we sometimes refer to as an in-flare. Other schools of thought refer to it as an out-flare. Other people call it a flexion disorder. What it is when your pelvis, right? This is the pelvis, the whole thing. Ilium, ischium, sacrum, other ilium. There's movement amongst all of that. We're going to refer to this as your pelvis. What can happen is one of the sides, the ilium and the ischium, rotates forward. This is supposed to happen as we walk, this alternating movement. Same thing in surfing. I'm going through this front side wrap. I'm collapsing my back leg. You're getting this rotation. Pelvis, sacrum, right? So I want this text out of the way. There we go. So what can happen is we can get stuck there with one part of the pelvis rotated forward and the other rotated back or neutral, but we've got this torque. Imagine if this ilium and ischium is rotated forward. Any movement of these bones will influence that sacrum. The spine sits on top of the sacrum. So if I torque half of my pelvis forward and it sits there, it gets stuck, it's not able to then retrovert or posteriorly move, that sacrum gets torqued and rotated. Because of the iliolumbar ligaments all through here, get this sign out of the way, come on. Any movement of the pelvis and the sacrum influences L4, let's get rid of that, L5 and L4 vertebrae because of your iliolumbar ligaments. So again, you see all this connective tissue back here. Get this, there we go. So if we get stuck there, you've got all this torque going up the spine. And again, we know that surfing has a lot of asymmetrical torque loads, different pelvis positions. It's easy for us to get stuck there. So one thing we can start doing from a prehab perspective is Eldoa. In particular, an L5-S1 Eldoa. You'd also want to go after L4, L3, L3, L2, L4, L5, L3, L4, maybe an L2, L1. You can get all that in the Surfdoa program, but you can check out the L5-S1 tutorial on YouTube. And what's essentially doing, developed by Guy Voyer, it is a fascially driven exercise that its sole purpose is to decoapt or decompress L5, your fifth vertebrae, and the sacrum. All right? It's trying to separate those by a millimeter, decompress, because you've also got heaps of connective tissue, right? But then also all of these muscles that can get torqued and rotated, and it's trying to open up and decompress. A byproduct of that exercise can be a balancement or neutrality of the pelvis. So if we're stuck there because we surf, back knee's always cocked in, we're always rotating one certain way, boom, it torques that forward, it torques the sacrum, L5-S1. We can start to bring back some neutrality to that pelvis, help to decompress an L5-S1 segment that was potentially compressed via this L5-S1 Eldoa. I'm not going to get into the details of this right here. You can see the generic position. We've got like a 12-minute YouTube tutorial. Also check out the Surfdoa program. Eldoas have really helped my low back. And so via fascial tension of the entire system, we're getting that pelvis, ischiums against the wall, even heel pressure vertically to pull, again, that fascial system, tying all the way up into those sacrotuberous ligaments, trying to get some balancement and neutrality, and trying to make some space where that spine got compressed. This can be a really, really powerful and helpful exercise for back health. All right, last, long video. A little bit of technique. Let's look at my average turn. Try to zoom in a bit. So yeah, a lot could be better, right? I could have gotten way more vertical, started that turn way up higher, right? I could have turned up here instead I'm turning like mid-face. Sick, right? One of the biggest issues with my turns, like you can see me doing the reach around with the rear arm, but we call this my dead arm, that lead arm, just whap. It's limiting the actual rotation through that turn. It's not getting out of the way. I need it out of the way. We call it my gimp arm, the dead arm. The turn's not terrible, right? It looks kind of good. There's a little bit of spray, a little spray, but it's not insane. How can we do an Ethan Ewing turn? This is where it's up to us to practice. If you can have an awareness of technique, it gives you things to think about and work on when the opportunity presents itself. And then it's just trial and error over decades. Reaching through. So that lead arm, for a lot of intermediate surfers, that's your problem. You're going into that turn and slinging it backwards. Reach around or through. Reach through. Look, reach through, but you see how his lead arm has already started to open up. It's opening so he can reach through with the back arm. These have to coordinate. And you'll see as he comes through, do you see how much that lead arm is going to keep opening, 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 all the way? And again, so if you can coordinate, reach around with the back arm, get your head out of the gutter, and opening up that lead arm, and the vitally important, do you see where he's looking? Can't tell you. Next time you're at a wave pool, watch guys doing turns and trying to look at their spray. Wow, it's like, I could make so many terrible sexual connotation jokes about that. But don't look at your spray, bro. Don't look at your spray. Look through. So if you can look, reach through, open up that lead arm, you can get a much better rotation because you're getting rotation through the body. That's shifting weight onto that heel side rail, and you're holding that heel side rail through the turn. And then as soon as his eyes come out of the turn, the board is then going to start to follow. So you that are looking at your spray, you're stopping your turn short. Look through all the way around, give it the reach around, open up the lead arm. And I'll keep working on trying to do average turns I'll be back at HT's soon. Great wave. Here's a little spray. Okay. Technique, some prehab, and some exercise. This is how movement and fitness can help support your surfing. Shaka breath.